Thank you so much for joining our day 2 of the conference, and also for those joining online. So we appreciate your enthusiasm. So we are starting the first session of day 2, and then this is a panel session chaired by John. So we will talk about macroeconomic policy coordination for climate action, and I will give a floor to John Beirne.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. Yes, a pleasure to be back here at ADBI. I worked here for many years, of course. I'm now at ADB in the Macroeconomic Research Division. I think the panel session that we have today will be something that follows quite smoothly on from yesterday's panel. So yesterday's panel, we talked about fiscal policy challenges for climate action. We talked about some of the debt vulnerabilities that economies face in the region, and also some of the challenges around some of the mechanisms that are possible for addressing greenhouse gas emissions. Today, we're going to take a little step further beyond that and look at the role of macroeconomic policy coordination as a potential mechanism for addressing some of the challenges that we discussed yesterday, and also some other challenges as well. I'm joined here by 3 excellent speakers who will give their insights across different dimensions of the topic that we have for the session today. First of all, we have Abdul Abiad, who's a Deputy Chief Economist at ADB. Second speaker will be Fauziah, who's Senior Economist at AREA. And the third speaker will be Sayuri Shirai, who's a Professor of Economics at Keio, who's also advisor here for sustainable policies at ADBI, and has previously worked at the Bank of Japan as a board member. With that, I would like to ask, so let me just tell you what the plan is for this session. So there will be 2 rounds of questions to the panelists. That will take around 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and then we will open up the floor to questions. So as we progress through the session, please gather your questions, and we will come to those towards the end of the session. The first speaker will be Abdul, followed by Fau, and then Professor Shirai. First question goes to Abdul. So I'd like to ask you about what you feel are the main climate policy challenges faced by Ministry of Finance across the region, how to overcome those types of challenges, and also what you see as the role for coordination as a mechanism. So please go ahead for around 7 minutes. Abdul.
Good. Thanks very much, John, and good morning, everyone. I'll do one better. Instead of giving you my opinion about what ministries of finance need, I'll tell you exactly what the ministries of finance have actually said, basically drawing on my takeaways from a forum organized by the Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action that took place about 3 weeks ago. For those who aren't familiar with the coalition, it was formed in 2019. Initially, just 26 finance ministries were members, and over the span of about 5 years, membership has increased almost 4-fold to 98 member countries. They're guided by 6 Helsinki principles, of which Helsinki Principle 4 is where many macro climate economists are involved, and that's basically on developing the analysis and tools that can help finance ministries mainstream climate into economic policy making. And what I'm going to draw on is a survey of finance ministers or ministries that was conducted last year, and the results were released just last month. So there were 59 finance ministries that responded, majority of which were developing economies, 11 respondents from our region. And the survey is informative on what finance ministries are most concerned about, what analytical tools they need to incorporate climate into economic policy, and the practical challenges they face in getting this analysis. So let me start with what they're most concerned about. And one of the questions was, how concerned is your finance ministry about the impact of physical climate change on a variety of macroeconomic indicators, where answers ranged from the light blue, not concerned at all, to extremely concerned, the dark blue on the right, and then very concerned is the dark gray bar. And basically the impacts they were most concerned about are the impact on government spending. So 71% said of finance ministries said it was either they were very concerned or extremely concerned. about the impacts of fiscal climate on government spending. But you see similarly high numbers. GDP, it's about 58% of finance ministry is concerned. Government revenues, impact on government revenues, about 51%. You see a similar picture. So they're not only concerned about the impacts of physical climate change, they're also concerned about transition risk. So again, so this gets to, yes, finance ministries understand that both physical climate risk and transition risk are serious concerns, and it's the same variables, right? So what's that? 68%, 70% concerned about government impact on government spending, about 62% on impact on GDP, and 60% are concerned about impact on government revenues. So there's a clear recognition that it can have macro impacts. There's also recognition by at least some finance ministries that there are opportunities or potential positive economic impacts from climate action. And the three things that they mentioned the most are the possibility that they can leverage competitive advantages, either because of resource endowments they have, or because of market positioning in green technologies or in the associated global value chains. They also highlight opportunities arising from renewables, in particular, the chance to strengthen energy independence, energy security, and energy price stability. And many of them also highlighted the opportunities for diversification of energy sources, of diversifying manufacturing, or the economy more generally. Okay, so that sort of tells you what they're concerned about and where they see opportunities. So that can obviously guide, your research, and it's actually, a good motivation for this conference, right? Those are precisely the issues you've been tackling. Here, finance ministries were asked, what kind of analytical capabilities do you need? And so one of the items mentioned is that they say, yes, we need empirical research in climate economics, the stuff we've been seeing over the past day, and 60% of them said we need that. It's not actually that high up on the list. Higher up are actually case studies from other countries, 74%. And again, if you think about it, in many cases, they're grappling with how do you implement this in a practical manner, taking into consideration what Dean Bambang said about political context and business implications. But actually, top of the list, among the analytical capabilities they need is modeling. And why is that? I mean, one is because, a lot of the studies we've seen, sort of are backward looking, right? What can we learn from the past? But what we know with climate change is past patterns may not be that informative about where we're heading in the future, for one. A second is that climate change is a problem of compound risks, right? So risks are multifaceted. You have many different types of risks. They can compound both temporally and spatially. And because of this, you need the ability to sort of take in those risks, those multiple risks together. And something Hamza mentioned yesterday was that there's high uncertainty about where climate change is headed. And the ability to model different scenarios helps us get at that uncertainty. Okay, so what are the practical challenges they face? The number one number one challenge was, many of them said, well, our challenge is getting the staff and the skills needed so people who can handle this kind of analysis, which really talks about the importance of the wider ecosystem, universities, think tanks, international organizations that can support the finance ministries. And so many of them do tap that wider ecosystem. And this is the last slide I'm going to show. And this is important. So in terms of how often they regularly collaborate with these external parties, 63% of finance ministries said, oh, yes, we regularly consult with other government departments or ministries for economic analysis and modeling. 54% of them said we interact with central banks and other financial bodies regularly, and 38% interact regularly with international organizations. Universities, the ministries of finance only 15% of ministries of finance interact regularly with universities and research institutes. Think tanks are way at the bottom at 4%. And so it really speaks about the opportunity for researchers in universities and think tanks like you guys to reach out, to be more proactive in reaching out to your finance ministry. Don't just focus on talking to other researchers, reach out to them, understand what questions they're dealing with so that your research becomes really policy relevant. So just to end on on what John's last question about policy coordination, obviously ministries of finance play a big role in coordinating both whole of government, but also whole of country responses to the climate challenge, because one, they control the budget, two, they are central in prioritizing investments and in terms of coordinating policies. In terms of international coordination, I just want to say that the international fora, both COP, but include the coalition as well, and international organizations, including the ADB, are central in sort of that coordination mechanism. We can convene and we can coordinate. So let me stop there. I can elaborate on some of these points later. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Abdul, for that. I think you made some great points around coordination, both within the country and the potential for coordination across borders as well. I think this is an important aspect when we talk about improving capacity building, particularly in the case of modeling. I think it's a very important point. Let me move on to, let's come back to some of those points later, but for now, let me move on to the second speaker, Dr. Zen. So you have a lot of experience in financing, researching on financing for climate adaptation. And I think there's a role for coordinated efforts on that as well across different types of policy areas. So could I ask you about what you think are the main mechanisms through which this could be achieved through coordinated action on addressing climate adaptation infrastructure financing?
Okay, thank you, John. Good morning, everybody. I would like to highlight, I think, three things. Yeah, first, that our imbalance focus between adaptation and mitigations. Less than 10% of the total finance, climate finance, goes for adaptations, while actually mitigation is the forward-looking efforts, right? And it's measurable. But adaptation is occurring today. Yesterday, Dr. Akhtar also mentioned about how the climate effect and the climate change affect disproportionately to the vulnerable groups. And so, if I may ask the provocation about this, that are we fair enough to these current generations about this? I'm not saying that mitigation is not important, because what we are experiencing today is because we did not do the proper mitigation yesterday, right? So mitigation is also important, but our focus now more on the mitigation and less to adaptation. While we see that day by day, the climate change effects, droughts, floods, etc., become more intensified and also more frequent. In this during this summer or dry seasons in many hemisphere in the world, we experience the floods, right? Just pick some line from Abdul. He mentioned that the first one of the most concerned issues by the Minister of Finance is about spending, right? Effect on the spending. Now the question is whether they prefer to spend for coping with the damage or for preventing the damage from happen, right? So it's I think it's quite clear, but if we look at this point of view, but unfortunately it's not that way. So the second issues that I would like to highlight is about the ways to increase adaptation efforts that our study and research see. There are several ways that could improve the adaptation effort. First, that we integrate policy integrate the adaptation effort with other development agenda. For example, poverty alleviations, welfare improvement, or also productivity growths like smart agriculture, also like Bangladesh flood shelters that could also serve as um, as the school during non-flood periods. And second, integrate the adaptation efforts with mitigation efforts. So it could capture the synergies, and also it could also streamline the government budget between adaptation and mitigations, and avoid the trade-off between this mitigation and adaptation. Like the examples come from like China's sponge cities that that the urban water management reduce flood risk while lower the energy use. Yeah, also in Vietnam's Mekong Delta integrated climate resilience. And the third one is that adopt the appropriate technology. I think many of experts now becoming highlights this issue. Yeah, why we can have increasing renewable energy today or the last 5 years, let's say, because of the reduction cost of producing EV and EV battery, and also PV PV cells, right? And thanks to China, to some extent, they really developed the technology for that. So adopting technology can also integrate the adaptation efforts with development and mitigation. For example, the AI power early warning system in Mozambique. Yeah, and the last one is that how we attract private finance to participate in this adaptation efforts. I think it's classics, but it is the truth. Yeah, what happened in the challenging process to attract private financing in mitigation also happened in adaptation. Actually, like we know that government sets the schemes, right? And private sector looks whether there is opportunity there. But yeah, once the opportunity, the profit estimations is not go for the investment by the private sector, they will not chip in. So our typical solution is like we de-risk the highest portion of risk that could not be borne by the private sectors, usually by through MDB loans, concessional loans, etc. But that's not easy, and especially in adaptations. Yeah, because of the we will come back later, perhaps in PPP issue on this. The last one is that I'd like to highlight again that the developing economies found triple binds. First, that we have extreme physical climate vulnerability, and second, we have limited fiscal capacity, and the third one, we have a significantly higher cost of capital because of the shallow financial market, etc. So macro coordination become very important because yeah, I agree with what is findings from the IMF that say that climate objective often put aside of mandatory statutory mandatory between Ministry of Finance and bank of central banks. So there's no really clear who is the leading the efforts. Yeah, I agree with Abdul saying that Ministry of Finance, fiscal authority become the leaders, because it can really lead the whole, then coordinate the whole systems, yeah, the whole schemes. But also we have also examples that there are instrument conflicts, yeah, when when inflation goes up and central bank rush to try to stabilize it, yeah. With but we also found that price stickiness is really important aspect there. If the price is sticky, then actually central bank no need to rush into adjust the price inflation, yeah. And also on data and taxonomy gaps, our studies in ASEAN found that like standardized in regional level, like ASEAN taxonomy, really helpful for smoothing the process and avoid the disputes. But unfortunately, not many countries really adopt and look at this this taxonomy become like umbrella. Even in Philippines, they don't have a mitigation and net zero target, right? But they do the adaptation effort. So one of the things that the last thing I would like to highlight is that only approximately 60% of emerging market bank loans are mapped to green or brown taxonomies. Means that another 40% we don't know, yeah, whether it could be it goes to the brown or green investment. So it's not easy to yeah, it's become challenging for the policymakers to really to pick what is the right policy if you don't know the whole data and the details in data. So I agree again. I agree with the Abdul mentioned about finance ministers' concerns that they actually need support from the expert from the universities, and also they need to be equipped with the right capacity building. I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fau. So clearly fiscal policy has a very important role to play, and it could be even augmented and enhanced further with appropriate aligned policies in other areas of macroeconomics. And this brings me directly to the next speaker, actually, because I would like to get your view on the role of central banks, financial supervisors, and how that can be aligned with fiscal policy on climate without sacrificing some of the objectives that those policies may have. So please go ahead.
So I experienced, at the Bank of Japan board members, and I also talked a lot of central banks. So I like to explain kind of a position that central banks are facing. Number one, you can see most of the members who sort of monetary policy committee members, including governors in many countries. If you look at how they are selected, they are usually either appointed by government, or sort of chosen at the Congress. So that is a case in many cases. Okay, that is quite important. And central bank are supposed to oblige to the Central Bank Act, which are determined by the Congress, and so central bank are responsible for explaining to the Diet. So central bank do the businesses under this very strictly determined mandate. That is very important for you to know. Now I'd like to explain you more how this works. Okay, so yesterday we talked a lot about fiscal policy, and I said it's better to put it under the name of industrial policy because it not only includes taxation or subsidy or public investment, but fees in tariff, FYT, FYP, construction grid, sometimes conducted through passing all those costs to the users. So not all government determined activity going through the budgeting framework. So I say it's industrial framework. This is most important. Without government industrial policy, I don't think we can do anything. But at the same time, so green industrial policy is basically to shift industrial structure, right, toward low carbon industries and economies. So that's why I say this is industrial policies. Now, equally important policy is financial policy, because a lot of companies and individuals, they have, they are shifting to choose low carbon goods and services, and the company have to make a lot of investment. So somebody have to finance those activities. So that's why we need to develop sustainable and climate finance market. So without market, we cannot change industrial structure. Okay, so so the government have to do this carbon pricing or emission regulation, taxation, subsidy, and then how to develop this green and sustainable finance market, here comes the disclosure. Because think about who are going to invest monies. Most of this money come from private sector. It can be foreign, US or Europe or Japan, institutional investors or banks, right? So they like to know which companies can be more, viable in the forward-looking sense, and they want to make sure their emission target and transition plans are creditworthy. Because there are, to be honest, there are many greenwashing activities. So then money will be really used, unproductively. So that's why a lot of investors are very concerned about greenwashing. So that's why until today, although green bond market is growing, but not to the significant degrees. So disclosure is the most important, and then of course taxonomy and other measures will be important. Okay, so we have to think two things. Okay, so the climate policy is sort of industrial policy, so I can just leave it. This is already discussed yesterday. Now I want to discuss two issues. Yesterday I mentioned in the panel that there are two types of financial authorities. One is the financial regulator that monitors listed companies. So usually those are like OJK and a Financial Services Agency, a Security Exchange Commission or committees. So they try to develop capital market, okay? And so some cases, in the case of Singapore, MAS, Monetary Authority of Singapore, does both. But most of the cases, there's a division of labors. Here is very important, okay? So right now, these regulators that deal with capital market are most active in order to develop this sustainable carbon, sustainable market. So that's why you see green bond, etc. Okay, but also we have to pay attention to the central bank. Central bank normally monitor banking system. So they provide lender of last resort liquidity, and they always closely monitor the banking system. So that's why central banks are very important, because they deal with commercial bank, and commercial bank deal with small, medium enterprises. So central banks are quite important, okay? So, but we cannot really say central bank should do this and that, because depending on a country, the division of labor is very different. As I said, Singapore, one financial, authorities, right, MAS. In the case of Japan, we have a FSA, that deal with a micro prudential arrangement, and Bank of Japan look at the macro prudential, okay, and so the monetary policy. So it depends on the country. So you cannot really generalize central bank should do this and that. Every country have a very different structures. So that complicates this issue. Okay, so central bank, what they do at this moment, they try to look at their commercial bank and then promote climate scenario analysis or stress test. And so asking big banks and in some cases insurance companies to do long-term scenario analysis based on energy FS scenario. Okay, so that is at this moment they are doing quite extensively. Okay, so going back to central bank. So now let's look at central bank. Central bank usually have two mandates. So one is price stability and another one is financial stability, okay? The price stability, as you know, almost all central bank has independent monetary policy committee, and then they are usually given the independence with regards to the decision to choose which monetary policy they are going to, select. Okay, so independence is nothing to do with ownership of central bank. It's an independence with regards to the decision of monetary policy, monetary policy decision. So if central bank that is not want to do something new, quantitative easing or something new like buying stocks, if it's not included in the mandate, then central bank have to get permission from government. Okay, so this kind of relations is very important for you to understand. So right now, what central bank does besides scenario analysis, many central banks are member of BIS, Bank for International Settlement. You can ask a BIS to manage your foreign reserve, purchasing green bond for you. because the BIS have a lot of expertise and they are already doing this for about 30 central bank. So part of your foreign reserve can be allocated to green bond. Okay, so that's many central bank does. However, the problem is that this is a foreign green bond, right? It's not going to contribute to your country's green bond. So that is one issue. Okay, but anyway, foreign reserve can be used to promote climate finance. Other issue is regards to monetary policy. I have to tell you, it's very difficult for central bank to reflect the climate factors into monetary policy decisions. Remember from 2022, when the Federal Reserve and ECB, almost all central banks started to raise interest rate to cope with inflation. There was a criticism, especially in Europe, that this higher interest rate are killing the renewable energy companies because they cannot cope with higher interest rate. So there was a voices in Europe that central banks should provide lower interest rate to the sustainable and renewable project. Okay. To be honest, I have a great sympathy with that kind of view, but it's very difficult to implement it because at this moment, for example, if there's a food prices rising as a result of weather condition, of course, central bank can look at where this inflation come from, and it partially comes from weather, and they can decide whether they should take action by raising interest rate or not, right? But in terms of mitigation, how mitigation, the things can incorporate into monetary policy is very difficult to decide because monetary policy is a very short-term decision and based on output gap, labor market condition, etc. They just decide what interest should be until next monetary policy meeting, which is 1 year, one or 2 months. So very short-term oriented. So there's a lot of criticism to the central bank when the central bank raises interest rate, but it's quite difficult at this moment operationally to include climate factor into monetary policy. The one exception is, I think, People's Bank of China, which is very, very, very different. What PBOC does, because I think central bank has already quite a lot of information from banks, where they invest. So so the Central Bank of China does, if the banks are providing loan to green project, okay, and then such kind of collateral, if there is a green related collateral, so the commercial bank want to borrow money from central bank can have a higher haircut. So differentiate collateral. That's one way. Also, commercial bank put money at central bank, right, in the form of reserve balances. And so if the commercial bank is doing more green activities, give higher deposit rate. And also central bank can provide long-term lending to the commercial bank based on green activity. Bank of Japan do some, but to a great extent right now by Bank of Japan, China. So like this, but they are doing it, but it's not clear this is monetary policy because it's still outside of a main policy instrument. But to some extent, they can use those methodology to promote green thing. But beyond that, it's not easy. So what central bank right now to do is not with monetary policy, but with financial stability. There's no criticism for this. Central banks are member of BCBS, many central banks are member of Basel Committee on Banking Supervision, and everybody know the central bank is try to stabilize the banking system. So right now, almost all central banks are looking at financial stability. And so that's why I said climate scenario analysis. The central bank asks commercial bank to do that. That is a prudential policy that they can do. So, so going back to coordination. So usually under this framework, so prudential framework, central bank can collaborate with government. For example, right now, central bank asks commercial bank to do climate scenario analysis to the 2050, what's happened, global temperature become more than 3 or 1.5, and then the bank calculate the estimated loss and capital requirement impact, right? But commercial bank is doing without knowing much about their client corporate behavior. So in the end, they, the regulator, which deal with listed company, have to collaborate with central bank. In that sense, cooperation is necessary, which still emerging in some country. And so in terms of macroprudential, I think you do a lot more. One more issue, when central bank does collaboration with government, that is a case of serious crisis. For example, 2022 COVID-19 pandemics, at that time, many central banks did zero interest rate, quantitative easing, and besides, governments also provided low interest rate lending to small and medium enterprises, exact collaboration. So during the crisis, it's possible we see such kind of monetary policy and government policy collaboration, but otherwise in normal period, as I said, it's a bit challenging.
Hey, Professor Shirai, thank you very much for those points. I think you raised three very good points that stand out. I think the first one on disclosure and harmonizing across financial policies, I think it's an important aspect. I think I would agree with you as regards the difficulty with monetary policy compared to financial stability objectives. You know, when there is a shock, for example, on the climate side, that would trigger some tightening in policy. This can have actually the negative impact on the investment that would be needed for resilience. So there can be a bit of a problem in that regard. But I think the work of the NGFS, for example, is something that is really laying out the macroprudential stress testing on climate. And the other issue on collaboration between the central bank and the government only in crisis times, I think, you know, we should really try to look at ways that could really take place also in non-crisis times. Let me come back to Abdul for another round. So first of all, I would like to ask you, building upon what we've just discussed, so aligning short-term macro objectives with longer-term climate goals. Do you see any issues there that you would like to flag? And also the role of ADB in particular on the climate side.
Okay, thanks very much, John. So on this point, actually, can I just get the clicker, please? So I just have a couple of slides just to support the arguments. I think it'll make it go faster. On this point of aligning short-term macro goals with long-term climate objectives, oftentimes people present it as like, you know, short-term pain, long-term gain, and therefore how do you get the time consistency? The chart on the left is from our 2023 report on Asia and the global transition to net zero. The benefits you can see in blue and orange, which are air pollution benefits from reduced air pollution and benefits from avoiding the damages of climate impact. The costs are in green. So yes, it's costly. If you look at overall, so if you only focused on so I guess the point of this is they are aligned. It's not the case that it's net negative in the short run, net positive in the long run. It's that case if you only looked at the avoiding climate damage. But if you factor in, co-benefits like reduced air pollution, it's actually aligned. And so part of what I would recommend to ensure that alignment and to emphasize that alignment is shift the messaging, shift the narrative. So, for example, we brought this up. I brought this up yesterday. Shift the emphasis to air pollution reduction, which everybody is aware of, and again, and because it's not in the future, right? So, and you can see it. So, think about China and their push to reduce pollution, and that helped. Similarly, another point to sort of shift the narrative. Instead of focusing on the taxation part, focus on the revenue it will generate and how you can use that. I mean, whatever you think of President Trump, he's a master at messaging, right? You impose tariffs. We all know that it's American consumers paying for it, but in his narrative, it's like, look at all the billions I'm raising, and it's China and all these other countries are paying for it. and it works. People, people are convinced. Similarly, we talked about opportunities in transition. You can emphasize that, right? The ability to achieve greater energy independence, energy security, opportunities to diversify, get in, ride on this green technology wave. And lastly, build climate awareness. This was talked about yesterday. The table on the right was mentioned already yesterday. 91% of the region already believes that climate change is a serious problem and affects their families now or will in short years. And that also sort of allows you to build that that momentum even in short run. So in other words, to justify. Okay, role of ADB, not just the role of ADB, but basically the role of ADB and other international organizations. This table, I thought it would be useful to show again. This comes from the coalition. These were their like 12 action items. 3 items for finance ministries to take care of. Another 3 items for funders and providers of technical assistance and capacity building. That would be ADB, but also other similar organizations. So let me talk about those items 4, 5, and 6. What do we do to support climate action? Well, number 6 is really, I already mentioned, the ability of international organizations to convene and achieve coordination and collaboration. Other things we do, we support through financing the building of capacity in finance ministries and other economic organizations, economic agencies. An important point, many international organizations also help with the availability of open source tools and data. So more so our colleagues in the World Bank and the IMF developing models, for example, that can be used to evaluate fiscal risks. In our case, we do a lot on the data front, the multi-region input-output tables, for example. So that's what ADB can do. Let me just, one item for the academic and research community, since many of you are here, I'll just point to number 7 again, and this just emphasizes the point I was making earlier. Refocus research to meet the needs. Talk to them upstream so that you co-design your research questions and then communicate with them downstream in ways they understand, not in the ways that we sometimes communicate to our fellow researchers, but translate it to things that are useful for policymakers. So let me stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Abdul. So actually, there is no misalignment, or at least there should be no misalignment between the short and the longer. Yes, that's a good point. And also, I think it's a good point to make about having capacity building that is practical and very well easily understood by practitioners. Let me move on to, by the way, I'll be having questions, Q&A around very soon. So first of all, let me ask Dr. Fau about the issue of public-private partnership and collaboration in that to that extent, and how that can contribute to the climate goals. Go ahead.
Thank you. There are a long list actually, but I will pick some of the most concerned one. First, that there are misaligned between incentive and timeline between private expectation and public and the project of the adaptation and mitigations. So the private sector usually aim for the short and immediate term of the returns, while the payoff from the climate projects usually in the longer term. And second, on the incentives, public sector value social benefits, right, like positive externalities, etc. But it cannot be translated into the cash flow of the private project. So they cannot count it, internalize the external positive externality. And then the third, that regulatory uncertainty and policy changes. Yeah, IEA found that from 2015 to 2022, half of the cancelled project in Asia Pacific due to the policy reversals. So there are changes in the feed-in tariffs, renewable quotas, etc. So it's very important that government be consistent with the policy they promise. Yeah, and the third one is allocation in PPPs. The same, but for the adaptation and mitigation. Many of the climate risks are not codified in the contract. So who will bear the risk of this? Private sectors perhaps feel it too excessive for them to bear the risk of the climate change. So there. Next is the pipeline of the bankable projects that is very thin usually. Again, that's why the importance of the fiscal authorities, especially to lead this process, the public-private partnership. And it could also use the green taxonomies to be consistent with the technical levels of the regulation and contracts, and also to embed the climate risk clause in PPP and enforce the law. For example, in Singapore and Philippines, they could also embed the climate clause in the regulatory use in the PPP contract. And so that I think another thing, another way that to align incentive, the one that public and private sector expectation view it differently. I think the role of the MDBs will be very crucial. That like first equity loss could be borne by this ODA or by the MDBs concessional loans, and so other acceptable risk can be borne by the private sector. Thank you.
Moving on to Professor Shirai. So, when we talk about scaling up finance across public and private sectors, what do you see as the best sort of a policy mix there, and what would be the key risks to that?
Yes. So before I answer to your question, I forgot something. I refer to what I said before, because this is a good opportunity for me to explain about central bank's activities. So what's happening is why, so when the interest rate was raised in 2022, 2023, and especially Europe, some of the renewable energy project, companies, they were bankrupt. Okay, so there was a lot of criticism and then, to the central bank. So let me explain a bit more why. But in the end, central bank didn't, give a lower interest rate to the renewable energy project developers. Why they don't do it? Because it means central bank have to decide which one is winner and losers. That is a political decision. Unless government is very clear which one is green, which one is brown, and the government is really trying to promote green. Unless government has a very clear signal, then central bank have to decide, right, which one is green and then brown, and then that is subject to political decision. It's very difficult for central bank to do it. If somebody come and call governor to the Congress, this is same for globally, and then if the politicians say, why are you picking this? And don't you think this is fair? Do you think we have authority to that? Very difficult. So central bank is not a position to really pick which one they should provide more financing. That's why sector allocation is a policy matters, and central bank is very reluctant to do it. One more issue. Remember, there's the independence provided, right? They want to keep it. So if some policy related decisions they have to make, for example, allocation, sector allocation, then central bank will start to collaborate with. Collaboration looks good, but at the same time, some central bank worry collaboration may lead to the less independence. They are very much concerned. So I hope you understand there is a lot of cautious, very cautious behavior from central bank. Having said that, so what the central bank can do, because the central bank is looking at the banking system, right, including and then banking sector focus on the small medium enterprises. It's very important for central bank to start to look at their banking system from climate perspective. For example, how to calculate financed emission. Probably in the past they never looked at it, but they have to pay more attention, and possibly they can help the commercial bank to provide some adjustment in their lending scheme, sort of lending conditions, right? Interest rate or maturities, so a central bank can work with government about, how to promote SME finance toward green. In that sense, I think central bank can work together, but not in the area of monetary policy. I hope you understand. Yeah.
I'd like to open the floor for some questions. We have about 10 minutes. Uli, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much for a very interesting discussion. I just wanted to follow up on the monetary policy issue. I mean, I've been working with central banks on green monetary policy, central banking for 15 years now. The first one actually with Bank Indonesia. So I beg to disagree a bit on what you were saying about kind of monetary policy itself not really providing options. I mean, we do have examples, and in fact, Bank of Japan is one example where kind of a special facility, lending facility was introduced back in April 2021. And so banks that do provide kind of climate-friendly lending can get cheaper refinancing from the BOJ. The BOJ actually has a kind of rather a broad framework, so it's not very prescriptive. It doesn't Japan doesn't have a taxonomy, and so banks are left to a certain degree to self-assess what is kind of green lending, green investment. But we have other examples. I mean, you mentioned China, which of course has done a lot, but we also have Bank Negara Malaysia, which introduced climate lending facility targeted at SMEs, and Bangladesh Bank has done stuff like that for a long time. So it's not that it can't be done. And I've had also very intensive discussions with the ECB, for example, and there are unfortunately not a majority of board members, but there are several board members who are actually also keen on pushing this. And I think we need to get away from this kind of rather narrow notion of monetary policy being just interest setting. I mean, you mentioned collateral frameworks. That is also a central element of kind of broader monetary policy framework, and collateral frameworks can be very powerful. And just on the prudential, I think, given the also kind of issue of time horizons, I think on the prudential side, we need to get beyond the rather narrow focus on microprudential risks to macroprudential risks, because I think the macroprudential risks, when we take a bit of a longer horizon, are enormous. And I think that would provide central banks actually to be much more forceful also in using different prudential tools.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, actually, I fully understand what you're saying. I'm not saying central bank is not able to do anything, okay? But in terms of mainstream monetary policy interest rate, that is very difficult, that I just mentioned. I fully understand, like Brazil central bank is doing very actively, and some central bank try to do it. But what I want to say, for example, case of Bank of Japan, it's really good. They started at about the same time that PBOC started. But when you look at how they finance, they cover everything, right? Transition finance, and so that's decided by government. That's what I mean. It's not their decision to where they allocate. So in that sense, government has to clarify which is green or not. Then central bank can do it. And that's my point. Now, a bank of PBOC, as far as I know, they ask commercial bank to submit finance emission data. So to some extent, I hear they have some knowledge. And then commercial bank already know how to calculate. So given that, I think they can do some collateral arrangement, interest on reserve, and etc. So that I just wanted to say. Of course, we can try to expand what they can do. So I'm not really opposing to your idea, but I just wanted to explain to you there is a kind of sensitivity here. And then I kind of know it because, among people, I hear that kind of issue from a lot of central, including Europe. European Central Bank. So I just wanted to share with you this kind of sensitivity is important. Okay, but having said that, I fully agree with you. We can try to encourage central bank to do a bit more.
Okay, thank you. We have a time for another question, or two. So, Dong-Young, please go ahead.
Yeah,
Oh,
this
sorry.
question is
Thanks.
for maybe Abdul and
We'll
Sayuri.
take a couple of questions together. So yeah,
Okay,
please go ahead.
and or Sayuri. But the question is this: I have a pretty strong opinion on this, but I want to hear your opinion. Do central banks should they have a climate change or affecting climate change in some way as an additional objective, or should they care about climate change only to the extent that it affects monetary policy? For example, by weakening interest rate mechanism, by damaging the balance sheets of banks affected by climate change.
Okay, Dr. Akhtar, do you wanted to ask a question?
I just wanted to point out that the debate we are having is somewhat of an old debate because we have come a long way on this frontier. I recall I was in a panel with Christine Lagarde, if you recall, and we had the European Commissioner also there. And there was this debate, should central banks be involved in climate change and also the implications for monetary policy or financial system. I think rather than go into a long-winded debate, I would simply say that the acceptability of it started with the network of the greening financial system, which is a coalition of central banks. First, there were advanced countries, but now it's virtually membership is very large. Also, I think if you need financial stability, it's very important for the central banks to factor in this. I'm not sure I would advocate that central banks should get involved in the intermediation issue, but there are, of course, weights that can be applied, which could be either mandatory or could be prescriptive in the sense of providing to the instructions to the banks through the macroprudential regulations and micro. And compliance on that should be looked at. But I think now all central banks are following this. I know even in Pakistan, in my country, this is happening. But what is important is to see, has it really impacted things on the ground? I personally think cushions are there, but it hasn't deterred banks from delivering, from going for terrible projects. Banks continue to finance projects which may not have the necessary safeguard. And that's because of the business element for the banks. Banks have to make money, they'll just continue to provide. So I think there's still a lot of work to be done to make sure it is adhered to some of these standards, and there are not a lot of slippages from it. I just thought I'll talk about this network for greening because I was very impressed. I thought it would die off, but it has gone up and up.
Okay, thank you. We're rapidly running out. Okay, Homer, please.
Just very quickly. So actually on the adaptation finance discussion earlier, there was a mentioning of taxonomy gaps. So I just want to share more of a recommendation. Back in 2023, MDBs actually published this joint methodology for tracking climate change for adaptation in particular. So they do have a general classification of adaptation projects. Three. First one would be activities that are adapted. More in the design of these activities. Type 2 activities are the ones that shared objectives of adaptation and development. So these are like your rippling effect activities. And last would be activities that enable adaptation. So this comes down to your policy and regulatory environment. So, just in case your taxonomy needs some grounded validation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I think the two last interjections were more like comments. So I think perhaps Dong Young's question can be answered at the coffee break, perhaps. given the time, so we can more or less stick to the plan. I would like to thank obviously the speakers for excellent insights and the questions that we received today. I will not attempt to summarize, given that we're already at the time. I think there is scope for further coordination across macroeconomic policies. We're talking about fiscal policy here today, but I think there are lots of areas around monetary policy to look into further. With that, we close the session. Thank you very much.